Thank you for coming to one of my favorite team in the entire organization. No shade to anybody else in the organization, but their very first office hours. I am Tracy Holmes. I'm a DA here at HashiCorp. If you've never met me before, hi. And the office hours today is for the Terraform Plug and SDK team, which will talk about all things plugin and provider development. Today, since it's the first office hours, we're probably going to give you more of a background, what's in store for the year, decisions that are made, and why we are where we are. And then we'll take any questions, make yourself comfortable, add any questions you want to the chat, and we'll try to answer those as we go along. That being said, if you do have questions or comments, interact with us. Like I said, put stuff in the chat. Be welcoming, inclusive, be kind, be professional. Let's just chat and have fun. If you've never looked at our community guidelines, I'm going to paste that in the chat for you. And while I'm doing that, I am going to let the team introduce themselves.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Katy Moe. I'm a senior engineer on the Terraform Plug and SDK team.
Hi everyone, my name is Paddy Carver. I'm the engineering lead for the Terraform Plug and SDK team, and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi everyone, pleasure to have you joining us today. I'm Carmichael, and I am the product lead for the Terraform Providers organization, working closely with Paddy and Katy on the team.
Working with Paddy and Katy is a handful. Just saying that going forward. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to give it to you, Paddy, and I will check the chat.
All right, awesome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, I feel like I start every one of my talks with, we're going to talk about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. But that's true today because it's our very first office hours. We kind of wanted to cover some ground of where we've been, talk a little bit about what we're doing, and talk a little bit about what our future and like our vision for the Terraform plugin SDK kind of looks like. And I apologize, that's going to look like a lot of me talking at all of you. So feel free to drop questions in chat so that I can make other people answer them and give my voice a break. So just to start out, kind of let's talk about 2020. And I know nobody wants to do that. I know we all just kind of agreed that we would get out of it and never speak of that again. But we actually had a really productive 2020 on the Plugin SDK team. A lot of things changed, a lot of things happened. And the year really started out with the version 2 of the Plugin SDK for us. And version 2 of the Plugin SDK largely was about cleaning up the interface between Terraform and the Plugin SDK. We were trying to cleanly separate the Plugin SDK from Terraform. We already had our own repo at that point. That was version 1. But we were still backporting changes from Terraform into the Plugin SDK every so often. There were still pieces that relied on each other. And that was because to run tests using Terraform, we were actually embedding like a pseudo Terraform into our test framework. And that turned out to be non-sustainable and a maintenance nightmare. So we kind of made a major project of ours to remove that dependency. And in doing so, clean up a lot of our interfaces and make it a lot clearer what providers should be depending on and what providers should not be depending on. So that was kind of the version 2 release, and we tried to fix a bunch of stuff. We tried to add, features like context, so you could have more dependable timeouts, so you could have better cancellation support. We tried to add diagnostics, so you could take advantages of things like warnings and multiple errors. But really for us, the theme of the release was let's try and make this nice, clean interface between Terraform and the plugin SDK to kind of operate as its own library. And in the wake of that, we kind of started talking as a team and we're trying to figure out what the future of Terraform provider development looked like. And we identified a core theme or a core problem that we wanted to solve. And that was Terraform provider development hasn't kept pace with Terraform development. We have these abstractions for provider development. We have these things that, we make available so plugin authors can write their plugins. And they were created 6.5 years ago. I think it was July 2014 or something like that. We first kind of created these abstractions, and the abstractions haven't significantly changed since then. And the reasons for this are good. The reasons are because we've got this wide ecosystem of Terraform providers, and we want to make sure that Terraform provider ecosystem stays stable and we don't break it, and everyone can continue to use the Terraform providers they know and love. Nobody's work should be wasted. that's kind of like a central tenet of our team, is that the code that you wrote that works should continue working. And so we kind of had that, but then Terraform's abstractions have changed over time. Terraform 0.12 notably changed a lot of the underlying thoughts and processes and type systems and protocols that underlie Terraform that plugins are built on. And we kind of just sort of crammed the new abstractions into the plugin SDK's kind of interfaces so that it would all basically sort of just work. And that's kind of how we got through 0.12 and how we made providers continue to keep working. Unfortunately, that means that some of the advanced features that 0.12 introduced, we weren't able to take advantage of or surface for plugin developers. And it also meant that we had some brittle code that was hard to kind of keep working and keep bug-free and kind of resolve bugs with, because it was a compatibility layer between Terraform 0.11 and Terraform 0.12. So that's a challenge that we've been trying to work with. And if you ever open an issue in our GitHub about, like, you know, an extra item being added in a set under certain conditions or something, either been met with silence or us being like, yeah, that happens sometimes, we'll look into it at some point, but we can't really help you right now. That is largely where that comes from, is this legacy of having things kind of forced into working with Terraform 0.11's abstractions. And so that was kind of what we decided post SDK v2. That's what we decided was like the central problem we wanted to solve. That was the biggest impediment to the future we wanted to build. And the future we decided we wanted to build, like our vision for what this all could be, was we wanted to make sure there was a Terraform provider for every API. Like, that's our elevator pitch. That's the idea, is we think no matter what company you're at, no matter how much development time you've got to devote to Terraform, no matter how well you know Terraform, we think that your API should be able to have a Terraform provider built for it to expose your API to Terraform users. And that's something that we believe strongly in, and that's something that we've got a lot of great ideas on how to get to. So in the wake of SDK v2, we started trying to kind of line those up into a trajectory that would get us there. And we started off very quickly with Terraform Plug and Go, which we released in October, and we'll put a link to that in chat. I'm actually just going to check my links here, because this is like a year-long story and it's 9 a.m. and I want to make sure I'm not forgetting other things. So,
are you sure it's 9 a.m., Paddy? I thought it was 5 p.m. I mean, I'm looking outside and it's dark.
It's 9 a.m. in Paddy time. It's always 9 a.m. in Paddy time. But
okay.
Yes, no, that is a good point. We are a distributed team, so I don't think, are any of us in the same time zone? Is it 9 a.m. for anyone? Yeah, no, Tracy's in, Tracy's in Eastern time, Tracy? Do I have that
Nope,
right?
Central. I'm Central.
Central. Tony's in Mountain, and Katie's in
Greenwich Mean Time.
Thank you. I kept being like Greenwich Standard Time, and I was like, those aren't the right words. And I'm over here and way too early for this.
Okay, I just wanted to interrupt you, Paddy, just to make things
Please
harder.
do.
Okay, you can continue now.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna interrupt me more, and I was like, yes, go, somebody else talk. But no, that's cool. I will just keep running my mouth. That's fine. But yeah, I am skipping parts of the story, because before we got to Terraform Plug and Go, Katy and I did a talk for HashiConf Digital 2020, where we talked about the history of providers, and that was super fun. It was a quick lightning talk, but it covers a lot of the backstory about how we kind of ended up in the situation we're in, and kind of it highlights both how Terraform has changed and how provider development hasn't in terms of the abstractions, but it also kind of highlights how many provider development abstractions are newer than you might imagine. A lot of things that I assumed were introduced in like 2015, 2016 actually came about in 2017, 2018. And I know that all sounds like super contradictory. I promise it makes sense if you watch the talk, or at least so I've been told. I did not actually watch it back myself and have no memory of giving it, just like I will have no memory of what I'm saying right now. But yes, I see a Terraformians in chat. I'm sorry. On my live streams, I insist it's Terrafam. So hello, Terrafam. That is how I insist on addressing you all here. But yeah, we'll put a link to the talk for HashiConf Digital in chat. But then we can get on to Terraform Plug and Go. Terraform Plug and Go was what we kind of decided was going to be our first engineering project following SDK v2. And the idea behind Terraform Plug and Go was we wanted a way to surface like everything the protocol had to offer, right? We wanted to, if you think of helper schema and the SDK as kind of like abstractions on top of the Terraform protocol, we wanted to introduce like a way to interact directly with the protocol. For me, I kept thinking about it as the difference between like building an app with Ruby on Rails versus building an app like directly writing HTTP servers yourself. And that's what we kind of tackled next. We decided that was the lowest level, the smallest footprint, the kind of base layer we could build everything else on. And we called it Terraform Plug and Go because it's a Go client library for the Terraform plugin API or protocol. And so we built this thing out, and it's literally just Go bindings for the protocol. Anything you can do on the protocol, you can do with Terraform Plug and Go. There's nothing in your way, but it is for expert users. It's very advanced. It's easy to kind of like back yourself into a corner or make Terraform do very, very wrong things. It's easy to kind of, I don't want to say shoot yourself in the foot, but like it's easy to make mistakes with this thing. And it's not super obvious how to piece everything together. And we realized it's not super obvious how to put everything together. And so when we announced it and kind of when we did our first presentation on it, we did a live stream together with Tracy, which was wonderful, for HashiCorp Live, where we built a alternate reality HashiCorp called DadCorp, because part of our founding mythos at the company is that the company got called HashiCorp because Mitchell Hashimoto actually just had an LLC named HashiCorp already when he and Armand started the company. And so an inside joke of the company is what would happen if Armand was the one that had the company, and obviously we would be named DadCorp today. So we built an alternate reality DadCorp provider, and we kind of walked through upgrading this SDK v2 provider to use Terraform Plug and Go live on stream, and kind of showed off some of the new features and capabilities that Plug and Go offered. So that was Terraform provider DadCorp. We'll link to I need to check what this link is for. We'll link to the Git repo for it. I believe we've also got a link to the talk as well somewhere, and I hope we can find that. But we will find out. Wow, I'm talking a lot. I'm very sorry, y'all. But yeah, so we did all that. And we released Terraform Plug and Go, and we're super happy with it, super pleased with it. I'm really excited about the future that offers. And a part of the story I missed, SDK v2. I apologize, y'all. I'm just jumping all over our timeline here. After SDK v2, one of the things we took away from it is testing is really hard. Like it's really hard to test all of the provider interfaces that y'all take advantage of, because we have so many providers. There are just so many of y'all in our ecosystem, and sometimes I feel like I forget about it because I don't see you all face to face, which is why I'm really excited about doing this kind of stuff. But like, there are like hundreds of providers out there, not hundreds of people, hundreds of providers, and that is just mind-blowing to me. So thank you all for all the work you do on making this possible. That's really amazing. Especially the people out there who are writing providers to order me pizza, because like you are doing the Lord's work. That is what I needed in 2020. But yeah, so there are a lot of you're all using the plugin SDK, but because the abstractions kind of haven't kept pace with Terraform, you're all using the abstractions in subtly different ways. And that means that when we kind of cut a release of the SDK, it's always a fun like month or two following that when providers come in and are like, hey, you broke the way I was doing things. And we're like, you were doing things like that? And we don't really have a solid test framework for all of like a solid test suite for all the things that providers were doing. And we got tired of, as part of shipping SDK v2, we would just run our tests against our major cloud providers internally. And huge thanks to all of our major cloud teams internally, the AWS, Google, and Azure teams, who lent us their test resources and kind of helped us with ensuring stability here. But Yeah, so those tests take like, I think some of them take up to 24 hours to run and also cost a lot of money to run. So it's not super fun to use that as your main test suite. So we decided wanted to kind of have a better test suite for how people were actually using this development framework and kind of what people were actually using in practice. But we wanted it to be fast, we wanted it to be reliable. So we built an in-memory provider that just modifies its own memory, and that's where it stores all its state. And we're going to use it to kind of recreate all of the ways that people are using the SDK in production, so that we can guarantee that not only we, but core and all of our other tooling take them into account as we kind of move on. And so that was actually the first project after SDK v2, was trying to figure out how we were going to add some stability to our release processes and make sure that the things that people were depending on would not break on accident under them. And so we put that together. That's Terraform Provider Corner is the name of the project, so named because it's trying to capture all our corner cases. And so we'll put a link to that in chat. If you've got something that you're doing with your provider that you think might be weird, if you ever see us in response to an issue, be like, open an issue on corner, please, for us to add a reproduction there. That's kind of the context on that, is we're trying to make it so that we can easily run some very quick tests and know that we're still protecting people's interactions with the plugin SDK, and make sure that the work you're doing is going to be forward compatible and that we're not going to break your provider under you. Because again, that's like our central organizing idea here, is we don't want to break your provider. So yes, then we released Terraform Plug and Go. We did the DadCorp live stream. One of the things about Terraform Plug and Go, though, is you're essentially rewriting your provider. It's essentially a whole new SDK, and that's not great. Like there are providers out there with hundreds of resources and probably millions of lines of code, and nobody wants to rewrite all of these all at once. Like that's not going to be a fun experience. And so we were trying to kind of figure out how we were going to solve this problem. And what we came up with was this module we called Terraform Plug and Mux. And Terraform Plug and Mux is a way to combine two different providers into a single provider. And I know that sounds very bizarre, but it means you can implement your provider using two different SDKs and frameworks, and smush them together in a single binary and present them to Terraform as if it's a single provider. And what that means in practice is you're able to build a single resource with Terraform Plug and Mux, or Terraform Plug and Go, add it to an entire provider built with plugin SDK, smush them together and give them to an end user, and they have no idea you did any of this. To them, it's just a Terraform provider that works as always. So we're very excited about that, because that unlocks a really rich future for us. Because when you updated to plugin SDK v2, you had to update your entire provider at once, and that was a project for providers. Like that was a thing. We embedded with some of our provider teams to help them make that leap, and it took days. And like that's not ideal. That's not the experience we want for people. With Mux, though, we've opened up a future where we can release new changes, release breaking changes, things like that, and have people use multiple different versions of the framework in a single provider, and not need to upgrade everything all at once in a big bang. And like that's super exciting to me. I got very distracted by chat there for a moment, and I lost my train of thought. But we're gonna forge on. We're almost there. The only other things to kind of note that we talked about in 2020 and we managed to accomplish in 2020 is Terraform provider Scaffolding, which is a super cool repo. If you're starting a Terraform provider today, if you're just getting started out, my recommendation is start with Terraform provider Scaffolding. Clone the repo, modify it, use it. It basically gives you like the framework, gives you the scaffolding. It gives you like the basic structure of a Terraform provider. And I think that's a really great way to start quick. What's up, Tracy?
In that line of thinking, is that the only thing like somebody would need to get started with plugin development, or like kind of what all would they need? And because I'm still that person that hasn't actually written one yet, so I'm kind of asking for a friend.
You are like an expert Terraform provider developer. I have worked with you long enough to know that, Tracy. You can't fool me. That is a very good point. That is not the only thing. This is not the responsibility of our team, but the amazing Learn team at HashiCorp did put together some great tutorials and some like guided walkthroughs of building Terraform providers. And so we'll drop some links to those in chat. But yeah, no, I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because I always forget, because we didn't, that was a thing that people just kind of showed up in our chat and we're like, hey, we're doing this thing. And we're like, oh, that's amazing. That's the best thing that's happened to me. But yeah, so that was super awesome. And if you haven't checked those out, go check them out. They're a great way to get started writing Terraform providers. It's a great guided introduction. So yeah, that I'm super excited about those. But yeah, so that's what happened in 2020. That's where we are today. We've got Plug and Go, we've got Plug and Mux out. They're for expert users. They're a little bit difficult to use. They're very verbose, a lot of code to use them. But they give you the full power of the Terraform protocol and let you do some really, really neat things that you couldn't do before today. And that's kind of where we went in 2020. Where we are now, though, is I think we're focused on the question of, okay, can we take what we did with Plug and Go? Can we take that power, that transparency, that reliability, dependability, predictability, I guess, of it? And can we bring that to an approachable interface like Terraform Plug and SDK? Is that something we can do where, you know, it's not just for advanced people now? We can bring some of these new powers and abstractions to people who might just be getting started with Terraform plugin development. And I think the answer is yes. I think our thesis here is yes, we can do that. And so that's what we're working on right now. Is we're currently researching what might a framework that used the approachability of Plug and SDK, but the modern design and transparency and predictability of Plug and Go. What might that look like? How might we build that? What might look like? What might that manifest as? And if you have feedback, that's a thing we want to hear from you about. If you've got ideas or preferences, if you even just have like, you know what, in my wildest dreams, here's what I want to implement a Terraform resource as in pseudocode, like that's super useful to us. We can't promise we're going to actually do any of that, but like, it's always good for us to kind of hear what people's expectations are. The best ways to do that are the discuss forum for the Terraform plugin SDK, or opening an issue or feature request in the Terraform plugin SDK. I would lean towards the discuss forum just because the issues will probably be like, thanks, and close the issue just because we're trying to keep those like action oriented. But yeah, either of those probably fine, unless Tony's going to yell at me right now and be like, Paddy, keep people out of our issue tracker. That's also okay. Tony's the boss.
Hey, Paddy.
Tony's in charge of me. What's up, Tracy?
Or anyone on here. So just so I can get some clarification, Jay Doshi asked, I had one launch config, and I think this may be specific to a provider, but I had one launch config with one attribute associate public IP address equal false. So my expectation is the launch config to be created as an IP address type equal private, but it's not creating as default. So it's not that this is not the right time to ask this question. We just want to make sure that we get you to the right provider. Is this AWS specific?
I believe, yeah, that does look like an AWS provider attribute. Feel free to clarify that, but yeah, we can try to help you chase that down if that's the case.
Yeah, so where's the best place to get help with the AWS provider then?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think similarly, the discuss forum is a good place to ask questions like this. We often, and we just got clarification. It is the AWS provider. So yeah, if it's a behavioral question, discuss forum is a great place to go because we have experts there that can help answer. If it's a deficiency or something that you suspect is an issue, then just like what Paddy shared, right? We always welcome you to file that as an issue too. So thank you for raising that.
I definitely can try and guess as to what the AWS answer is, but I need to be very clear that I have not used AWS in several years and don't fully know what a launch config is. So I don't know it's going to be helpful, but it might be entertaining for me to guess the answer to your question here.
No. I have another question if you want to answer that one instead.
Oh, hooray.
This looks like a great question. I like this question.
Yes,
I like this question too.
Yvonne is asking for a friend also.
Of course.
But I may have a noobish question, and it's not noobish. Thank you very much. May have. I may be asking for a friend, but why would one want to write a plugin?
This
Just
is
in
a great question. I
It
love
is a
this
great question, isn't it? Yeah. It kind of relates to what you were saying before, Paddy, doesn't it? Like, you know, if you've got an API, it should be really easy to connect it to Terraform, because then people can use Terraform to create stuff with your service or API or order a pizza or whatever. So I mean, so providers are a type of plugin. They're not the only type of plugin, but we're focusing on providers at the moment. So I think there's a bit of confusion between the terminology here. The Terraform plugin SDK is what you use to make providers. So we're talking about making Terraform providers. And Ivan has clarified that this is for a friend. So if your friend is interested in having their API or their service work with Terraform, then writing a provider using the plugin SDK is the way to go.
Awesome. And yeah, just to add on to that, there are two, I think there are kind of two different ways to interpret the question. One is why would I write a plugin? Like what's it good for? And just, I think we didn't kind of touch on this at the beginning of it, but providers are how we surface functionality into Terraform. So like when you create a Terraform resource, that's not something that's built into Terraform. That's something that one of these third-party plugins or providers kind of provide the functionality for. And providers are the translation layer between APIs and Terraform, if that makes sense. So that's kind of one way to interpret it. And the other way to interpret it is like, why would I want my API to be available through Terraform? And I think that's a really good question. Part of it's just because you get Terraform's declarative interface for free. We've spent, 6.5, 7 years, something like that, building up a declarative, powerful, user-friendly interface for Terraform. And I know I'm going to die in chat for calling Terraform user-friendly, but I stand by it. So we spent like 7 years building that up, and you get all of that work for free. Like you just get to integrate with all of our command line stuff, all of our crash detection, our state writing, all of the hard engineering work that has been done by the Terraform core team to make that happen. And it's something that your users want. That's something we see time and time again with our partners and the people we integrate with their APIs is usually it's something that users want to be able to use Terraform to kind of provision their APIs and consume APIs through Terraform, because it's easier than writing an API client library themselves. You just write your HCL and run Terraform apply. So that's the other reason is generally Terraform seems to be well used and well loved by consumers of your API. And I mean, my personal philosophy is it's if your users want to use a tool, it's always best to try and meet them where they are. But that's my hot take on that one. But that is a really good question, because we didn't cover the what providers are at the beginning of it, and that's a little bit on me. And when I say a little bit on me, I'm the only one talking, so that's a lot on me. But I think did we hit all of our questions in chat? Did I miss them? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit in a fugue state right now.
No, you're fine. Continue.
Cool. Where were we? We were talking about the new framework stuff. Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the things we're working on, is we're trying to build something that'll give you the dependability, reliability, predictability, and the advanced features of Plug and Go, but with the approachability of Plugin SDK. And if you've got ideas on that, please get in touch. We want to hear them. If you have thoughts on what you want a resource to look like, definitely let us know. That's really useful for us. But that's not all we're working on. Another one of our major projects right now that's in a design phase is, as we did SDK v2, we kind of changed out how we were doing tests. We introduced a new test runner, and we did that largely so that we could separate the plugin SDK from Terraform. So we introduced what we called binary test running and reattached test running. And basically what it does is it takes a Terraform binary, like an actual Terraform binary like you would use as a user, and just puppets it through executing the things we want it to execute, so that you can see what will actually happen in production. And this opened up a lot of really great possibilities for us. I mean, I'm going to list it first because it's the thing that I actually was involved with. You can actually now debug your providers in production and also in testing if you set them up properly. So that's super exciting. You can attach things like Delve to them. And that was work we had to do as part of that. But also, more importantly, you can do things like set up a test matrix of Terraform versions to run your tests with and test against multiple different Terraform versions. You can recreate user issues because we actually are matching to the Terraform that they have in production now. Prior to this, you would just get like a weird pseudo Terraform that wasn't actually any released version of Terraform. So it was always really hard to replicate bugs using the test framework because like you're not running the same code that your users are running. So it gave us much better parity to what users were running in production in the test framework. And as we did that, we were realizing that a lot of the things that were true about the framework not matching up to the abstractions anymore were also true about the test framework. Sometimes it wasn't obvious what a test was actually asserting about your provider. It was proving something was correct, but it wasn't telling you what that something was clearly. And it wasn't clear how to test the things that like you obviously would want to test as a Terraform provider. Like the obvious use case of, I want to make sure my config, my state, and my API all agree about what just happened. The way to test that is non-intuitive. And so we were like, can we redesign the interface of this to make it a little bit better? We were also talking about a bunch of other things that we wanted to do with it. Like, can we separate out the HCL that we're using to drive these tests? Can that go in separate files and not be embedded in the tests themselves so that we can do things like run them outside of the test framework, so that we can do things like run, 012 upgrade and other Terraform fumped and like other Terraform helper commands against them, so that we can use the new language server and editor integrations to be able to write them and things like that. Syntax highlighting, all of those nice things that you get with HCL files, we couldn't do with any of the embedded Go strings. Also, there's no ability to test modules right now in your provider because there's no way to have directories. So I think as we were working on that, we were like, okay, maybe we want to do another iteration of a new test framework as well as a framework. And like see if we can open up more possibilities and make it easier and more intuitive to test Terraform providers as well. So that's something else that we're currently in the research phase on. And then the final thing we've got that we're researching right now is, can we make providers more observable? Right now, debugging a provider is just hard. Like it's just hard. You run TF log equals 1, Terraform apply, and you get like 3 megabytes of text, and they all keep talking about graph walks and nodes and all of this stuff. And I have no idea what it means. And I've been working on Terraform for 4 years now. And like, I can't keep track of that. And how I always end up doing it is I then grep through the log file to find like, Paddy, this is the bug, is a string that I always put at the beginning of like the log files the log lines I actually want to like look at. And then go and find those so I can grep for them throughout the file so I don't have to read the whole thing. It's impossible to figure out like which part of the RPC call it came from. Like it's all just really rough. And we're like, we can do better than that. Like that's a thing we can definitely improve on. So one of the things we're looking at is in server engineering right now, and like web server engineering, observability is a big thing right now that people like Honeycomb have been evangelizing. And Terraform providers are technically servers. They're gRPC servers is how they're implemented, and Terraform kind of like instantiates them and controls the process, but theoretically they're servers. And we're like, could we maybe take some lessons from OpenTelemetry, from Honeycomb, from other places like this that are, trying to increase the visibility that ops people have into their servers and increase the visibility that provider developers have into their plugins. And we're still in the early design phases on this. We're still trying to figure out what that would even look like, but it's something we're really interested in trying to figure out if we can make those logs more useful, give you more information, and give you only the information you want, and kind of make that a little bit more configurable. So we don't really have anything to announce on that front today, but it is something that we're actively working on as part of building that future. And again, if you've got thoughts, opinions, feedback on this, Discuss forum is probably the best way to surface that.
Speaking of the discuss forum,
Yes.
caught you on a breath. All right, so I have a
Yes.
question I'm going to ask Katie. The question I'm going to ask you is actually in chat, so you might want to look at that because we got a discuss forum question, and then I'll follow that one up with the question for Tony. I was ready for you all today. All right, first question out of chat. Matthew wanted to know, and he's also asking for a friend. When writing a new provider that does not have an existing Go SDK, is it okay to create and bundle the Go SDK in the same repository, package, etc.? I'll let Katie answer that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can give my opinion on that. So how I'm understanding this question is you've got some service, so say you've got your smart kettle or whatever. And your smart kettle doesn't have a Go SDK yet, but you want to make a Terraform provider for it so that you can Terraform apply and boil your water. That seems reasonable to me. Nothing wrong with that. So you want to write a Go SDK and write a Terraform provider. So yeah, theoretically, you could put them in the same Go package. Everything would work. I would recommend making them separate, probably separate repositories, but at least separate Go modules, because then you can version them differently. So if you do end up needing to change something about your SDK, or if someone else wants to use your SDK, then you can have its version separately from your Terraform provider. You can always start off with them together and it would work perfectly well. But I think you probably want them to be separate Go modules. What do you think, Paddy? Cool. Good luck with your smart kettle. Your friends.
I'm with you on that one. I love it is the most British thing in the world. I love that you decided the sample API I'm going to envision you want to talk to is I imagine you want to talk to your tea kettle. Like that's
my teacup is empty. I'm feeling it's on my mind right now.
Mine's not. The question is ready.
You've got another. You have two, Tracy. That's the second.
The short version of this is this thing. If I pour it at 9, because of the tumbler, it is still hot at 12. So by the time I finish my coffee, I can just pop this open and drink.
This is how you know Tracy's a pro at these.
Yeah, you only need one Terraform apply at the beginning of the day.
Yes, exactly. So I might actually follow up with you on doing that for my kettle and the smart. Paddy, the one I was going to ask you is the discuss forum question, and it's about, well, here's the question. I'd like to hear more about what can be done for marshalling, unmarshalling of dynamic pseudotypes following from, and then they gave the link of Terraform Plug and Go, dynamic pseudotype, JSON, marshal, unmarshalling.
Okay, I'm gonna have to pull up this one because there are like a few different directions this could be going, and I want to make sure I get to the go in the right direction with this one.
Yes, to give everyone context on this question, there's a thread in our discuss forum where this has been discussed before. I think we can probably link to.
Is the question come up through the discuss forum? It looks like possibly. Yeah.
The question came from our discuss forum thread about this office.
IWA Raptor, my old friend, whose name I don't actually know, and that I've never met them. But I talk with them quite a bit on the discuss forum, and I believe in our SDK issue. Okay, so really what this is Paddy did not have time yet to get back into the discuss forum and answer these questions. Oh man, those are back. Sorry, this is what happens when you make me read live on stream. And these I have tested this. Okay, so yes, so where we left off is I believe the person asking a question 3 days ago pointed out that, okay, so I'm gonna back up here and just give some context on this. Using Terraform Plug and Go, you have full access to Terraform's type system, and there's a function to convert from Terraform's type system to Go types. However, there is no function to convert to arbitrary Go types. You have to like assert something about what the Terraform values are. And this all makes sense if you're a provider developer, because normally you know what the schema is and it's a whole thing. But people wanted the ability to say, I don't know what the types are. Please give me default Go implementations of the types. And that makes sense usually when you're using what's called dynamic pseudotype, which is let the user give me any type what they want. And it's a whole thing. And I'm not going to go into the whole context here because we'll spend the rest of this time talking about it. But So that's the general gist of it. And so we talked about it. There's a Terraform Plug and Go contrib repository, which we might want to link to. I'm just gonna, I can't create a channel to join the chat. Somebody who can type in chat, which is not me, I suppose, will link to Terraform Plug and Go contrib. But so we created this repo, and as part of this repo, the first package in there is an implementation of letting people basically do just that, of passing in a specific Go type to this conversion function, and it will give you basically the equivalent of an empty interface. Like if you do JSON.onMarshall into an empty interface, it'll give you some default Go types for it. It's basically the equivalent of that. And so we talked about all of this in a thread, and everyone was like, this is great, but now I want to go from the default values that the empty interface gave me into the Terraform type equivalent of this. And I have feels about that because I have feels about everything. I feel like 90% of the time that is my job, to have feels. So we talked a little bit about that in the discuss forum and about my feels on it, and people talked about it, and I don't know that I've made a decision yet on that, but I think it's something that we could probably introduce harmlessly. And where we left off is, I believe the question asker said it's actually pretty easy to break the dynamic configuration changes structure from the original Go primitive type. It was an interesting experiment at Please. I suppose the real question now is why we're not just using ctie.value, since we know this functionality will work. And I've got two answers to two different questions there. So the first part, I believe the functionality, this is why I think the functionality is tricky and why I didn't want to introduce it in the original tf_types.value, kind of like a conversion function, is because I think everyone's going to want subtly different types there. And so I think what's going to end up being said in that discuss post is, here's the code that implements it. Feel free to do your own function like this and give yourself back whatever types you want. If you want something more specific than that, we can talk about maybe changing the implementation of what we've got out there already. I think it's just going to be like a weird balancing act for us to find the best possible defaults for that and to do those instead. And again, for people those defaults don't work for, we're talking, I think it's like 40 lines of code tops or something like that. It's actually not a whole lot of code to implement this thing in user space. And so that's something that we can definitely do and talk about. But yeah, so if you want specific types that aren't the defaults, you can always copy and paste the function basically and do it in user space and have it convert to whatever types you want. The second question there that was asked, which is why aren't we using ctie types, which is again a very long story about what ctie is, but it's basically like the implementation Terraform Core uses for this, is because ctie is a dynamic language constructor, like it's a type system for constructing a language, which is how Terraform Core is using it. But the plugin SDK and Plug and Go aren't giving provider developers the ability to build a language. They're trying to surface a pre-existing language to provider developers. And so because the audience is different, we decided it would make sense to develop a interface that was specific to that audience and specific to the context of that audience. Changing ctie is hard for us because it's used in Terraform Core, so we would have to kind of coordinate with them on it. And a lot of it is built from the assumptions of what makes sense for Terraform Core and related tooling, but doesn't necessarily make sense for us, where you're usually not like adding together two of these values and needing to kind of control the invariance of that when you're using a plugin SDK. Usually you just care about what the Go value underneath is or whether it's unknown or not. But yeah, so that's my very long, very convoluted answer to that. We can definitely chat more on discuss about this if you've got more specific questions about it, or if we've got time at the end, we can follow up some more if that didn't answer the question fully. But yeah, that's my answers there.
All right, and then Tony. Okay, so I'm gonna ask Tony a question, and then I'll give one to all of you because I kind of want to see what your answer is going to be. So the one I'm going to ask Tony is: we talk about the vision and we talk about the history and where we're going, but how are we going to get there? So like, what's your release cadence for Plug and Go or Plugin SDK, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. We try to release bi-weekly or fortnightly. We don't always stick to that. It doesn't always necessarily make sense where we are with the plugin SDK currently. However, I think as a team, we can see that evolving, especially given some of what Paddy has shared for what we want to deliver for around the plugin SDK experience and the tool set that surrounds that. So it really, I mean, the short answer is it somewhat depends, but as we begin to continue to invest in more modular components of the SDK, like Plug and Go, like Plugin Mux, we're starting to see interdependencies right between all of those packages. And we're going to, effectively main is going to start to have build up, and we're going to want to probably look at sticking to that more. Anything you'd add to that, Paddy?
The only kind of add-on I've got there is just that you are looking at the entire plugin SDK team, and so as we've mentioned in this, there are a lot of projects ongoing. So it does mean that sometimes we've got to kind of prioritize and pick and choose where our attention goes to projects. So like sometimes we don't pay attention to repos for a small amount of time while we try and address other repos and other projects and keep things moving. So we're playing a constant juggling game of making sure everything's keeping forward progress. And it's a thing that we're working on in 2021. We're looking to expand the team, but it's for the moment, sometimes I know it's frustrating, but there might be a few weeks that go by, but without a release in some of these. If you ever have an issue where you need a release or where you think a release needs to be cut, feel free to open an issue or hit us up and discuss forum, and we can, at the very least, talk it out if there's a reason we can't cut a release. But usually we can actually cut a release pretty easily. So yeah, that was the only thing I get to add there.
I have one just because I want to see what answer you all are going to give in chat. Question is, why is Terraform developed as a stateful product or tool, I guess?
Why is Terraform stateful?
Yeah,
I really like this question because it's not really SDK related. So, but it is kind of getting to the core of exactly what is Terraform and what exactly are we doing here. So I think the easiest way to understand this is to turn it around and say, what would happen if Terraform wasn't stateful? So imagine Terraform doesn't write a state file locally. So you have some configuration and say it defines an AWS instance. So you run Terraform apply. Terraform knows how to create the AWS instance because it's talking to the AWS provider. So it goes and creates the instance. And now you want to update or say destroy that instance. So if you run Terraform destroy at that point, Terraform doesn't have any state, so it doesn't know which instance it's supposed to destroy. Maybe it has your account keys and your API keys and things, but maybe you've got several other instances which you've configured up there. So what the state is doing is it's allowing you to kind of link resources in your configuration to resources in the real world. And it's the kind of key that Terraform uses to link those two things so that it can then perform subsequent actions on those resources. I think that's the main thing state does, but does anyone want to add anything?
The only other thing I've got is state kind of makes it a little bit easier for Terraform's graphs to work separately. So you've got things like the refresh cycle, which gets the latest stuff. And then when you do interpolations in Terraform config, I've realized not a lot of people mention this. So every time state comes, or not a lot of people realize this. So every time state comes up, I try and mention it. When you do interpolations in the config, you're usually interpolating what's in the state into that area. So interpolation can be thought of as a way to access state in your configs. And I think that's a non-intuitive thing, but an important thing. Because every time people ask me about why is my sensitive data being stored in state? I'm like, well, because it's gotta be if you want to surface it to your configs. Like that's where Terraform gets the information for its interpolations. And I think those interpolations are really at the heart of what makes Terraform powerful. So I think it's important that Terraform be stateful to kind of enable and empower those. But that was the only other thing I had there.
All right. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
I can talk a little bit about not what we're doing right now, but what we hope or thought or like fun ideas we've had that, to be clear, are not backed in or based in research at all. But like dreams we have, pipe dreams we have for the future. I've got Tony over here in a cold sweat panicking like, oh no, Paddy's talking about things that aren't on the roadmap.
I think that would be a good way to close us out. So give me some dreams.
Okay, so as we talked about, the idea here is we want a Terraform provider for every API. And I think that the work we're doing are important steps on that. Like, I think it's important that we get plugin, that we do like plugin box, plug and go, that we have the framework, test framework, observability and stuff like that. But like, I think we can dream bigger in, the future, for some value of the future. And to be clear, I'm not talking the future of like 3 months from now. We're talking way out. And some of the things we've talked about for that are like, can we integrate with API communities that already exists? Can we create tooling or integrations with OpenAPI or gRPC or all these other ways of describing your APIs to lean on the tooling that you already have for your API, but to take advantage of that and when you're constructing your Terraform provider? Is that something that we can take advantage of? We've talked about, Katy and I have had many daydreaming long conversations about, the possibility of creating a command line helper for Terraform provider development that would automate a lot of things. Like, can we make it so that we can do automatic code migration for you when you're upgrading between breaking changes of the SDK? Can we do things like TF dev new resource or whatever and have it scaffold out a resource for you automatically and give you just like the code there? Can we do things like code generation? Can we give you the ability to define patterns and, resource endpoints and things like that use those patterns and just build out entire providers without writing any Go code at all or writing very little Go code? Is that a thing that we can do? Stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. We've talked about, how would we improve our documentation? What learn guides can we help create? How can we kind of make all of this happen? I think there's a lot to look forward to in the Terraform provider developer experience here that I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what a modern Terraform provider developer experience looks like right now. So I'm very excited to kind of be on the team and be working on this project because I think there's a lot of really powerful, really neat stuff that we can do that's going to make Terraform provider development a lot easier and a lot more approachable.
Ooh, they had a follow-up question. Can't we achieve provisioning of AWS infrastructure using Ansible? What makes Terraform different from Ansible?
I mean, you can. I don't actually know if they're still there. They were there in 2016 when I last looked. But like we used to have a Terraform.io comparison of Ansible and Terraform, I think, at some point that tried to be very fair to both of them. I'm not going to try and do it live because, first of all, I haven't used Ansible since 2013. So like, it's not fair for me to try and compare 2013 Ansible to 2021 Terraform. Like, that's not a fair comparison. I think my personal hot take on this, and I'm going to just cover up the icon here, not as a HashiCorp representative at all. My personal hot take on this is, if you have your provisioning of AWS infrastructure working with Ansible and you're happy with it and you have no problems, I just keep your code that works. Like, don't borrow problems. However, if you're just getting started, you're trying to compare these things, trying to figure out what works. I personally really like Terraform. I think Terraform's a little bit better suited for it. I think Terraform's got a lot more resource coverage the last time I checked than Ansible did, so you can control a lot more of AWS's APIs. And I think Ansible was intended a lot more for the configuration management of, I've got a machine and I want to get that machine up to a certain state, whereas Terraform was intended for, I've got an empty AWS account, I want to spin up a bunch of different resources, load balancers, machines, networks, things like that, security rules, all of that. And it wants to provision your whole infrastructure like that. And I want to just throw out there, this is not an either or proposition. People can and people do a lot, like so much, use both of these tools effectively together. You can have Terraform stand up all of your machines and then use Ansible to provision the software on the machines to the kind of environment you want. And that's something people have successfully and effectively done at very large enterprises. So that's kind of my hot take on it, is if you've got code that works, like we have enough problems. You don't need to like borrow more just to use the hot fun thing. But if you're starting fresh, I do think that Terraform was a little bit better, was built with this problem in mind, whereas I think for Ansible, it centers a lot more on what happens on a machine than what happens in your API account. And finally, it's not an either or proposition. It's okay to use both together. We like having friends. So I think that's my hot take on that.
I think it's great that you pointed this out, Paddy, and we'll post a link. Thank you, Katie, as well. There's actually a talk about using and intertwining the two solutions together, which we see often. But they're very, in many ways, they're very complementary. Of course, there's overlap, as there is with many tools. But yes, I think the call out there around config management versus managing, kind of orchestrating right across a bunch of infrastructure. There's some distinct differentiation in what Terraform has to offer, especially if you're looking for a multi-cloud solution, right? Something that spans the big cloud providers or the many other services that Terraform covers.
And I think that's going to close us out nicely. So weekly TF. So I'm posting that. Well, that's getting posted in chat. That's for community, by community weekly newsletter about all things Terraform. I definitely suggest you subscribe. The Vimeo link that you see is from Fire Hydrant. So someone built a provider from scratch that they live streamed on Twitch. And if you look very closely, you can see Paddy screaming in the sidebar the answers to all the things that he's going through while he's doing this on Twitch. But anyway, if you want to see that, because it was a really good stream. It was very interactive. You can see that at that link. And then as far as community office hours are concerned, we're going to be doing this monthly, but we also have community office hours across providers and tools. So if you want to see what the next community office hours is, click on that link for community office hours. The next one that we have is January 28th, and Taylor will be talking about the Active Directory provider. So please tune in for that. And again, if you have any questions for us for the next office hours, I typically have a link in the discuss forum where you can post things that you might want to see answered live. And I'll go update that date because I messed that up last time. Did anyone else have anything else to say or talk about?
Thanks for
I was just going to mention, oh, sorry, Paddy. I was going to mention quickly here that if you are in the process of building a provider and you're willing to share those experiences with us, we'll post a link here where you can set up some time, and we'd love to hear your feedback on that experience. Thank you.
All I've got is a thank you so much for joining us, TerraFam, Terra friends. I can't wait. Next time, Katie's going to be doing all the talking, and I get to kind of sit back and drink my tea, and I'm very excited about that. So.
Thank you, Paddy, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.